over the last 3 months. And I speak with two hats, really. The first hat is I speak as a staff with Alpha Asia Pacific. Some of you who are tuning in here might be aware of Alpha, but if not, let me just quickly say a quick word or two about what Alpha is. Alpha is a 10-week exploration course where non-Christians and Christians explore the basics of Christianity. It's a journey of belonging. The underlying, ethos of Alpha is that you can belong before you believe. It's all about community and friendship. And as you walk through content, so basically the format of Alpha is you have a meal, which is a little bit difficult to do over a lockdown period. So we have adapted Alpha into an Alpha online model where we play games and we focus on hospitality. That's the first bit of Alpha. The second bit is you watch some content, and the content is an apologetic of the faith. Who is Jesus? Who's the Holy Spirit? Why did Christ die? And then the third bit of Alpha is what, to me, makes it its secret weapon, is the aspect of community, where you sit in a circle and you have a discussion and you really deconstruct and peel back the layers of what you just watched in the video as well. And so it's a journey of exploration. You belong before you believe. And so I sort of wear that hat of a staff of Alpha. I work with Alpha Asia Pacific, and we serve over 20 countries within the region. And in the last 3 months, what we've seen is over thousands of churches adjusting the Alpha from a physical Alpha to an Alpha online model. So we've pivoted as an organization. And if you are a leader of an organization that has had to pivot your strategy, then I just want to encourage you to say well done and keep going. It's not easy managing an organization, working out your cash flow, making sure that you are above board, and yet trying to adjust your strategy as you go along as well. And then, working with churches, which typically can be quite an unsophisticated animal, right? We as a church, we don't really like change. And so helping the church to change, that's another battle in itself. The second hat that I wear is that of a pastor with HTBB. And HTBB has had about 14 weeks of church online now. And we've learned quite a few lessons. So very quickly, I just want to share 4 quick lessons. And if you like good practices about what church online looks like. And Jason Ding, if you don't mind making me host, I'll just put the slides on screen as well so that we can all see those lessons there as well. Great. Okay, so just a quick one on some lessons and good practices that we can take on board. But just before I start, I love to get some interaction from you as well. We've got a few on the Zoom call and some of you tuning in on Facebook Live right now. But right now in the chat, I'd love for you to rate on a scale of 1 to 10 how positive or negative your church online experience has been. And this question is intentionally broad, so you can think of a few proxies in your mind about what it means to be positive or negative in your church online experience. But in the last 3 months, as your church shifted from a physical gathering to an online gathering, how positive has your experience been? So 1 represents not positive at all, super negative. 10 represents really positive. So you've got people in your church who say church online is the best thing that ever happened since sliced bread. So let's have a scale and see what's the temperature in the room here about where we stand with regard to how positive our experience has been. And wow, there's quite a lot of responses that are positive here. So I'm seeing everyone is above 5, at least on the Zoom chat that we're in. That's really good to see. So if any of this resonate with you, you might want to type it into the chat as well. But we'd love to get some interaction with you and to lead into a discussion with you later on as well. Very quickly now, just a few lessons and reflections about what it's meant for us to shift our model into an online one. The first lesson is that going into an online service model has revealed to us the truth about church online, which is that it requires a low bar of entry. It really encourages a low bar of entry. It's so easy to join church online now, but it also involves a high bar of excellence. So low bar of entry, high bar of excellence. What do I mean by that? Well, I think that 3 months ago when the churches went online, what we did was we entered into a world where many of our young people were already natives to that world. There's a stat there from YouGov, and I find this fascinating. Malaysians spend on average more than 5 hours a day across social media platforms. So we're already digital natives. And for many of the churches that shifted online, what merely happened was that you just went into the planet that many of your young people already lived in for ages ago. And so it might have felt very abnormal or unusual, but for many people, engaging with content on a screen was already very, very usual. And what that means is that whenever you invite someone to church now, it's never been easier to invite a friend to join on a church online platform. Never before. All it takes is to share a link on WhatsApp. Also, we've seen that just the usage of internet has grown over the last 3 months. We've seen from TM, these are stats from TM, 30% of internet usage has grown as well. And so it means that the entry is just extremely low. But along with that has come an unprecedented challenge, which is that as easy as it is to tune into church online, it's also as difficult to keep people on the same platform at the same time with full attention. Now, how many of us know that we are now a distracted online church congregation? There's this fascinating study that came out of the US, a Abana study that says that at least 15% of practicing Christians during church online services are multitasking. I think that's super conservative. I personally think that there's a lot more people who are multitasking during a church online service. I personally, I embarrassingly would admit to you that I've done all sorts of random things over church online services as well, including being in a swimming pool with my baby boy, 6 months, Levi is his name, while we watch church online. So, and I think all of us can relate that we are all multitasking now. It's so easy because it's all on the screen. And what that means is that you're not just up against, a very low entry level, but also a very high bar of engagement. The expectations for excellence are a lot higher, and you're already starting from a premise of a distracted congregation. Second lesson that we've learned is that the church is not built on consumption, but on contribution. And if the first lesson was a little discouraging, then hopefully the second lesson offers us a little bit of hope. That if you are trying to fight this battle of keeping people on your screen to retain them, then you might think that the answer is better content. That's the temptation that we all sort of fall into the trap of. How do we engage people? Keep building on our content, keep going for the high production stuff. But actually what we've learned is that it's not just content that engages people, it's contribution. Ultimately, people want to engage meaningfully with what they're seeing on screen. Now, there's no way that we Malaysian churches can compete with, a church like Elevation Church or Hillsong London that has, the budget that it has while trying to engage our people. We're not playing at that level. I think why people come to church these days is not so much for the content, even though that is important, but also because they want to find meaning and some form of familiarity, some form of resonance to what they're seeing on the screen, some form of local taste that is relevant to them as well. And so what we've learned is that over the last 3 months, and you might have noticed this as well, most churches probably experienced a spike in church attendance, but then had a decline week on week because the novelty just wore off after a while. And the truth is this, we get what we measure. And here is a challenge for all of us. Do our scorecards show us what we truly value? I like to think that it's not just the church count or the cash flow or the content that we're chasing after. There's something a little deeper that defines what church is, and it's about community, it's about connection, and it's about contribution. People are hungry to contribute, and the church is not built by consumers, but by contributors. So the lesson here is that community and contribution matter more than content. But what does that mean practically? One of the lessons that we learned in HTBB Online is that when we had to suddenly shift on that 18th of March, that first day of MCO, we realized that the first Sunday that we went online for, we suddenly saw a 90% decline of our volunteer pool. We usually have X number of people serving on a Sunday with our physical services. People at the cafe team, people on the worship stage, people hosting at the door, ushering people. Suddenly, with the church online platform, 90% of them were no longer actively serving. They're no longer contributors. They just became passive consumers. And there's something about an environment like that that really reduces your level of engagement. It just takes the skin out of the game. And we know that when you don't have skin in the game, then you're not bought in and you're less likely to be engaging with this. And so over the next few weeks, we then started to think, how do we engage volunteers more meaningfully and just create more opportunities to serve? I mean, even if it's just sharing a link. So we literally have someone who just presses share link on a church online service now, we're just thinking of excuses to make people in any way contributing to the life of the church. But I also want to say that the church is not just a Sunday event, right? What we've learned from the past 3 months is that the church is a little bit more than just a gathering. We like to say church has left the building. Church also happens over the week. And so we've needed to think a little bit more intentionally about what the midweek pastoral or discipleship events look like for us. And here, a decentralized model like this, the Connect Groups system or Alpha really works to your favor because it empowers, it raises more leaders, it involves a lot more people. Third lesson, there are unprecedented opportunities, but there are also unprecedented challenges. And we know about the challenges. We know that it's been difficult. A lot of churches are not just struggling to shift their congregation to an online platform, they're struggling to make ends meet. Some of the churches that we serve in India didn't have as their primary question, how do I flip to an online model? Their primary question was, how do I feed my children next week? Because they're living on a week-to-week tithe basis. And so, one of the things that we've learned is when we serve churches in certain environments which are more oral in their culture and, less in terms of digital literacy, the practical needs matter even more at a time like this. And again, we go back to that phrase about what you measure is what you get. And this has been a season of us thinking, more creatively about what the real needs of the church are. I find this stat really fascinating. It says just 3 in 10 churchgoers have had contact with a church leader in the last month. This comes out of the US, and so we might not be at that level or at that place, but there's something informative about where the US church is at that has gone through a time of lockdown as well, that tells us that this last 3 months has seen a bit of an irony. We've had our digital connection shoot up through the roof. Suddenly, we're all digitally connected. Some of us are spending up to 9 hours on Zoom calls every day with our work, and then there's church online. So our digital connection is at an all-time high, but the irony is that our social connection is at an all-time low. And right now, I think the pulse on the ground is that we're all ramping up and starting to prepare ourselves to get ready to reopen church again. I know some churches are thinking of reopening in the start of July, looking through the SOPs, starting to communicate with the church leadership, starting to prepare their teams for a return to physical church. And I think one of the reasons why so many people are just raring to come back to church, whether or not the church is ready, is because social connection is at all-time low. And there's a real opportunity here to think creatively about how we can stay connected at a time like this. I love stories about how in some churches, youth pastors are driving around homes and sending food parcels to their church. In our church, we've been on pastoral calls, trying to call as many people as possible just to pray for them and to set up prayer channels as well. But the whole thinking is, how do we create more channels of social connection? And the final thought that I want to leave with you before I hand over to Jason Lee is this: how do we move from a place of church online, which is basically us sort of quickly shifting whatever we have on a Sunday and then moving it to Zoom, to a different mindset, which is online church. One of the gifts that we've had in the last 3 months is that many churches were for years and years thinking about having an online church service. And suddenly, just like that, COVID-19, made us, forced our hand and made us start churches all across Malaysia. And if you're a pastor listening to this right now, can I just encourage you that in the last 3 months, if you started an online service, what you did was you started a church plant. You really did plant a church, because it's a whole different audience. You're reaching a totally unreached people group, and there's an opportunity here that comes with having an online church. But moving from a church online model to an online church model really does involve changing your mindset from just consuming and passively watching to contributing, to having, to really thinking about, do we have a team, a pastoral online team? Do we have an online pastor? Does our church budget reflect what it means to be maintaining an online church? And how do we reaching people who can only be reached through a digital means? Now, the online church gives us an opportunity here to reach people that have never been able to reach before. People who maybe for political or geographical reasons can't physically enter church, or people who are still exploring who are not yet in the faith and who find it a lot easier and a lot more non-threatening to check out church just because you can check out church from the comforts of your study room on your computer screen. So I just want to leave that challenge with you, and maybe we can continue to chat about this, but there's so many opportunities that come with this. And as we start to see the physical church returning again, might I encourage you to think about retaining this platform that you've already built in the last 3 months, and to see how we can move from a church online model to an online church model.
Wonderful. Thanks, Abel. That's really good. I think some of you might have think, wow, there's just so much good value being shared here. And you may say, the next step is, how do I? Well, I guess the good and bad news is it's all DIY. It's so easy to learn and Google and find about how you can do this. An anecdotal experience is my father is a pastor of a church in Malaysia, and he's learned video editing skills. And just yesterday, he did a Zoom call with me and my wife, and I've got a 17-month-old daughter, seeing grandpa showing what used to be the computer room now becoming like a recording studio of sorts, with all these nice round lights and good audio with a microphone as well. And I think everyone now is going to this world, in a world where there's just so much mess. It is in a message that we are creating that is important. So thanks, Abel, for sharing. I'd just like to share a bit of good news as well. So a bit about my background. I'm in the technology industry, and I connect a lot with Christians who are actually living and breathing in the technology space. So I just want to share a bit of statistics for you, and take this more as an awareness. And you can access these slides later. It's on Facebook Lives, or you can just take a picture of the screen if you would like to as well. But I'll be sharing some links and what is relevant. So if you can see on the screen right now, this is actually a search on Google Trends, and you could see that the search for church online has actually picked up right after the lockdown had happened. And some news as well. Many of you will be familiar with the Bible app known as YouVersion. There are more than 1/3 of a billion downloads, almost 300 over million downloads made, and it was recorded in the month of April. That was the largest month with 15.89 million Bible plans subscribed, 8.92 million Bible plans that are completed, and 142 million Bible plans days being logged in April. And that's what's happening with regards to people actually having that curiosity to go online, not just in Malaysia, but globally as well. The other thing to also note is there's a platform called everystudent.com, and that allows for questions on a student ministry. And this is just a bit of a snapshot. From 2017, there were 23 million visits to 2019, 56 million visits. And in 2020, it's recorded in this platform that every single day, 3,000 people are coming to accept Christ. So these are just some statistics that are happening globally as well, as an encouraging note. And Abel mentioned about the Bana project. It's a project actually collecting data, and this is specific to church US adults. And we're seeing that people are streaming on their own church, and also sometimes to a different church. But there is also a worrying concern where some people are not streaming as well. So one thing to point out is actually, is there a way that we can follow up on our church members? I know many churches have made it a point to call every single member on their database to say, hey, how are you doing? This is where you can connect to with regards to connecting to church as well. And this is a toolkit that was produced by them called stateofthechurch.com. So you could have a look at it, and there are regular podcasts that are happening from a global and from an American perspective. Another thing that is put a lot of resources have in place is coronavirus in the church. This is with regards to a lot of church guides. There are a lot locally, and this is produced more for a global and American view that you can see. And if you haven't used the church online platform as well, Live Church has given it completely free to everyone. I know most churches are testing out with streaming on YouTube or posting on Facebook. The church online provides quite a robust area where you can have opportunity to pray and to also have a chat function and even access the Bible within the platform itself. So that's something that you can look up to, churchonlineplatform.com. And I want to share a bit on what are the other interesting things that are happening around the world. I know the people at Faith Tech, these are Christians who are in the technology industry. So this could be coders or software engineers, and they even have what you call hackathons, where they will gather together for a weekend and they will try to create an app or a website that could solve a genuine problem. So if you're interested in joining the Faith Tech community, you can just go to faithtech.com. It's led out of North America. There's also a VR church. So you think, wow, virtual reality, is this the next big thing? So I know Pastor DJ Soto is leading that. And these are actually people who may actually sometimes never step out of their homes. And this could be people in different conditions who prefer to use virtual reality. And now they've actually expanded to different time zones. So if you're interested and you've got a VR headset, you can have a look at this as well, vrchurch.org. The one that I'm part of is known as prayfortech.com. This is primarily with Christians who want to pray for the technology industry as well. And then some of you are thinking, wow, now that we've seen a move from the physical to the digital, who is actually the stewards of this digital? And these are really the people who are working for technology companies. So if you feel led to do that, you can look into prayfortech.com. Another one as well is the friends at Christian Vision Global. They've decided to release hundreds of Christian videos available for free. So if you look there, this could be helpful for pastors or leaders who want a sermon illustration or video. This is specifically catered for you to produce, or not to produce, actually to use content that could be relevant for your church itself. It's called resources.cvglobal.co. And over in Malaysia, I mean, how many of you have gone for mission trips? Now this is a digital mission trip. So Campus Crusade for Christ are organizing digital mission trips. And that's something that as churches start to get familiarized with the SOPs and getting volunteers coming in, you could also organize a digital mission trip where you could start to learn to share and to connect with people through different means. So these are just a few examples that you can see creativity and innovation abounding within the church itself. So we haven't got the latest statistics yet, but Hootsuite, a social media company, provides usually a snapshot on what happens in terms of the daily usage, and almost 7 hours of internet use. And this is in January. Imagine now with the lockdown, and I think Abel mentioned you could be in 9 hours in all the Zoominas or YouTubinas and Facebookinas that you could join in. But the world is consuming more content than ever. So I think one thing that we could start to think about is what kind of content are we creating? But more beyond that content, what kind of relationships are we building? Nothing beats the fact that from the biblical days as well, Jesus didn't use all the fancy things that he could, but just started with coming to someone and just building relationship with them. So that is something that I'd like to share. And if you'd like to actually make use of the resources, I just end with one verse first, that for us to be wise in a way that we act towards people around us, make the most out of every opportunity. And now is an opportunity as well. And make sure that your conversation be always full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer to everyone. So if you'd like to actually access these slides, there's a QR code. So you could just take your phone and scan it. I'll take a screenshot, and then this is actually available right now for you. But the whole purpose of this is just to give a glimpse of what's happening across the world. There are actually hundreds more of initiatives that are happening. And you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You could use what's available, and majority of these are actually freely available. So that's really much what I'm sharing in terms of a view. What would be interesting is actually hearing from everyone, any questions you may have, or any thoughts that have come out from what Abel or myself has just shared. But Jason Ding, just passing it over to you right now. Yeah, I think you're on mute. So.
Thanks so much, both of you, for sharing such great insights. And I think there's a lot of things that we can learn from our neighbors and people around the world. Lots of resource, and I think definitely, I think what we'll do is also compile the resource that you've shared, and then we'll put it into the post in Rema Radio as well. Here at Rema Radio, I think we've journeyed through this in a very interesting way as well, because as soon as the lockdown was announced, the question I asked myself is how do we respond to all this? Because we keep saying that we are sowing into the digital mission field. We keep saying that we need to be faithful where we are placed and what we can do. And what we've done is actually webinars like this. So this is the 10th webinar we've had through the course of the whole MCO, CMCO. And before we go into deeper things and engaging with the people in this room and Facebook, I actually have another guest which I just asked him to join barely an hour ago, because he has been quite a proponent of pushing for seminaries to go online. So I invite Stephen Ng to share just a little bit about your experience about digitalization and ministry.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. I was not prepared actually to answer all the questions, but I think over the last 6 months, I've been actually pushing for seminaries to go online, because you see, to attend a class in Seremban every Tuesday night, and to drive down there and to drive back here in KL, it's almost impossible. So that was how we started doing the online thing. Initially, all the tests were and they failed. Okay, and then the lecturer was actually doing some, he was actually writing something on the Zoom whiteboard, and he said, I think I like this very much. You see, everything has already failed at the end of the day. Suddenly the answer just came, Eureka, this is the answer. So while he can actually teach in online, he can teach in the physical class. Those of us who are here in PJ and KL, we can actually follow him on Zoom. So that was how the hybrid class first started for. I think it was probably the first in the seminary that I was in. So that became a very good platform for us to introduce, but nobody wanted it initially until God sent the COVID. And I must thank God for the COVID. It's like the persecution that came to the city of Jerusalem. Nobody wanted to go out, of Jerusalem. And what finally, persecution was the one that sent them out. And recently, over WhatsApp and over Zoom, we have actually coached about 400 to 500 people from India, from Indonesia, from Australia, from Malaysia, very basic Hebrew. And a lot of them are starting to read Hebrew now. It's interesting. Over WhatsApp, we can actually do it, and using 1 or 2 Zoom sessions. So I'm excited in the sense that even with WhatsApp, I managed to share the gospel with somebody in Sri Lanka. One night, I just had this little inspiration and say, why not send him a message and say, are you born again? I was actually writing something on apologetics, conversational evangelism. So I was just tried it out now, So just send him a message and say, are you born again? He was actually attending the Hebrew classes, and he was in a chat group on WhatsApp. And then when I asked him this question, it just carried on, the conversation just carried on. And then I discovered that he actually had never received Christ as his personal savior. I said, why don't you pray this and receive Christ? So you can see, it's exciting over this COVID period. This is a wonderful blessing that God has given to us. And I think I can continue on and on, but I think there's one particular seminary which was supposed to be online, but they never go online until recently. And when they went online, people were skeptical. Who is this, new kid on a blog? And suddenly, because they went online, they had about 450 people sitting in the Zoom session, learning the Old Testament and the New Testament survey. I say this is wonderful. It's never happened before. Yeah. So this is something that is great. And I think over the last couple of months, you see a lot of emails flying around from people like, seminaries like SES, Dallas, and Norm Geisler. They're trying to use the digital platform to reach even Malaysians. So this is something very great. I think recently also my former pastor was based in the States with 43,000 online students. He has also set up a Bible study to reach people in Malaysia. And I think the first session we had about 178 people attending a Bible study session. So I think this is something interesting.
Yeah. I think that the key highlight which I wanted Stephen to share was really before the whole MCO and COVID-19 attendance for seminaries was a bit of a challenge, but once it was made available and they went online, it went exponential. In fact, their Zoom account couldn't handle it. They had to keep upgrading and upgrading.
Yes, that's right.
The highest amount,
Yes, that's right.
the biggest amount.
That's about 400 over. I think about 400 over people attended the sessions without fear for I think about 10 to 12 weeks.
Great. Yeah. All right, Stephen, thanks so much for sharing that.
Yes, thank you.
All right. So, I mean, I think it's really exciting times that we are in. And I think as how we started really is God is doing something. And the whole season, if we are sensitive about it and we see there's so many things that's moving all across the world. So once again, if you're joining us, if you just joined us, you are listening to this Rema Radio's 10th webinar. And today we really want to value add. It's not like when we talked about it between ourselves, Jason and Abel and myself, we say we didn't want just another one-way communication webinar. We want to have an open conversation and hear from you guys and to really make the most of this time that we have together. So if you have any challenges that you are facing or anything that you feel that you want to talk about more, we are more than happy to do so, to engage on these topics. And if you have this, just list them down in the chat, and we would love to talk about them if you have any. But maybe the other thing I want to ask is actually another mini poll among you guys, right? In the past few months since the lockdown and since the MCO and all that, did you online at least, do you see in your own churches attendance increase or decrease? Right, it's a question we are curious about. If it's increased, if it's increased, can you just type 1, and if it's decreased, just type 2. Yeah, 1 for increase and 2 decrease. Yeah. So and I think maybe you need to give a variable, a bit more context. So because Abel did say increase, it started off strong, and then it went to it declined a bit, right, over time. So I don't know, maybe over increase maybe after 1 or 2 months. Yeah.
And even then, there are challenges with how you define what the right number is, because remember we have limitations about how many digital devices there are at home. So you might want to, I know some churches might even multiply by 0.8 to whatever number they have on Zoom or on their church online platform as well. So that in itself is a conversation, right? How do you count church attendance these days? That is in itself a challenge too.
Yeah. So actually, just recalling back what you guys shared, and I think the temptation or the struggle is to try to see what everyone else is doing and then try to match in terms of, say, content, right? Abel, you talked about that just now, content. And I do feel, it's the challenge for pastors especially. I feel it, right? Wow, suddenly this responsibility to shepherd the church through a global pandemic, right? And then how do we come up with, we're going online, how do we get things exciting, and how do we have the latest lights and sounds and all these exciting things? So it's very comforting to hear you say that it's not just about the mesmerizing content, but it's more about the community and the connection that we have. And but at the same time, I also feel that really this is a season of activation. I do sense that really God wants to use all. And even I love what you shared about how churches are starting to look into ways where people can serve in simple ways, just going online and being what they normally do in church, but in an online way. Because the method has changed, right? The medium has changed, but the message remains the same, isn't it? It's the same message that we need to come back to and do. But my I guess my call to pastors and that is really now we start looking into, because the burden of a pastor should be shepherding, not necessarily how do you operate Zoom in this way and then effectively make things move around and all that kind of stuff, but really to shepherd. And then now look amongst the church in your congregation, who can we activate and who can be maybe months before this they were more quiet and reserved and not really as forefront, but now bring them to the forefront because such a time as this we need people who are more technically inclined, people who are more maybe in terms of writing or coming up with the media or the sound. So these are people that is really, they need to be activated. What's your experience in this, both of you?
I'll just say that I think you're right, Jason. I think people are going to church online in Malaysian churches, not just for the content, but for something more, for a resonance to the message, for familiarity, for the community, to contribute. And just let me put it this way: if I'm going purely for content, then why would I, why wouldn't I just go to Elevation Church in the US, right? And I can watch it from my, at my own time as well. But I think that said, people's content still matters. And that's where it can be a bit of a challenge for us, because I think this is a season for us to learn. And not just learn new things, but learn how to learn in itself. I love that word kenosis, which is attributed to Jesus emptying himself out for us. And a huge part of learning, that whole process of learning, is to unlearn as well. Is to take all that we felt safe in, or all the pools of knowledge that we used to think mattered, and consider how they might need to be replaced or updated, and they might even be outdated and wrong. And so now we need to learn again. And part of the process of learning can be quite painful. And a lot of churches have gone through that pain in the last 3 months, making silly mistakes, having a bit of an embarrassing moment. I think part of learning is embracing those moments and having a posture of saying, look, there's nothing beyond us to learn. And humility means being able to empty yourself out and then absorbing new bodies of knowledge and experience as well. So I like that phrase, ready, fire, aim, rather than ready, aim, fire. I think it encapsulates a lot of our experience in the last 3 months of switching to an online model. And even this coming few weeks, as we go back to a partial physical service model again, we're all in some way or form ready, firing, and then aiming. And I want to encourage you that one way to really fire and aim, in a way that does not harm too many people or cause too much damage, is to prototype in small ways. Have this mindset of, let's start small, let's see whether it works, and use the cycle of build, measure, and learn. Build, measure, and learn. It's a common cycle that engineers use to prototype new technological advances and upgrades to their technology. Build something small, prototype it, maybe one service, start small with a few people, see whether you can absorb as many learnings as possible, and then measure it, find out what you've learned, knowledge manage that, and then learn it, and then go back to building, measuring, and learning again. And I think this is a time for us to quickly adapt. We always say, blessed are the flexible. This is a time for us to be flexible, to be really open to making mistakes, and then encouraging people who are trying. We also say, whatever you appreciate, appreciates. So let's appreciate this culture of trying and learning, and embracing the mistakes as well. And that's how we keep getting better and better. And the final encouragement is, the church has always been behind technological advancements. The church was behind the printing revolution. And I think right now we're standing at the junction of history again, as a new phase, comes on us. And I think the call for us as a church is to embrace this, and to see whether we can use this to further the gospel, to serve the world better. This is an opportunity as much as it is a threat.
Definitely.
I just want to add as well to what Abel said, that in the last couple of months, I've been in so many Zoom calls and online calls, and the most meaningful ones are actually the one-on-one calls, or the calls with just 2 or 3 people. And I think many of you will see and know as well that the personal relationships that matter. And these one-on-one calls are actually not in people within 5 or 10 kilometers from where I live. In fact, they are 5 or 10,000 kilometers from where I live. There are people who they are in a very niche focus area, like in the technology space, who are passionate Christians, all the way in Silicon Valley, and I connect with them regularly, and we cry, we pray, we laugh, we do things together over Zoom, and I think that we should not neglect that personal relationships can also be developed online. We can develop meaningful relationships and also host catalytic events that would help us to move things forward. And all starts with just the relationships that count.
Definitely. In fact, as we're talking about this, I have this realization that that's what actually we are trying to do even here. in this group, in the Zoom page, and also on Facebook, where more and more people are joining. How do we engage in a very, I won't say casual, but in a personal way, in a meaningful way? It's not just one way where someone is just passively watching, but we want to really value add for real. I mean, 3 of us, 4 of us here, we really want to do that. But how do we get to that place? How do we actually bring people to the forefront, and how do we engage in a meaningful way? It's not easy. It's really not easy, and we're doing this on Rema Radio for a while now, and it's not easy. Okay, but we try, right? So we have some questions here, and let's start with So Pearly Ng says that, I think it was you, Abel, who said that when the church goes online, the identity of the church is brought to the forefront. Can you explain that further? What do you mean by that? Whatever the church is, once you go online, it's even more evident, right?
Yeah. I think that's a great question. And Pearly also mentioned that in her church, one device can be equivalent to even as many as 6 people in the family. And I think that's true. I think, and that's why it's become a bit of a new challenge for all of us to adjust our scorecards and to see what really matters to us as we measure. I think if we're just measuring, the usual, which is tithes and offerings, so our cash flow and our church count, I think we're measuring symptoms of something that's a little deeper. I think they're important because they keep the church going. Cash flow is important, and church count is important. But I do think there's something else that keeps these 2 things going forward, which is community connection and contribution. When someone is invested, that's where they give, right? You give where your heart is at. And so, the question is, do our scorecards reflect that? One of the challenges that we've, started to consider is, how do we measure how many volunteers are serving every online service? And how do we challenge ourselves to keep increasing that number? Because that's actually, that looks more like discipleship than just consuming content on screen. And then to your question, Pearly, about how the identity of the church surfaces when the church goes online. I think there's a degree to which when we go online, everything just is amplified. And we know that inherently, even right now in this platform, there's a sense of, the stake is quite high. We don't know who's watching. And whatever we say in this hour, it is in some ways amplified into the interweb, right? Someone 5 months from now might be able to access this and watch this. And so knowing that, I think because the stakes are so high and because the internet amplifies your voice so much, it's a lot easier to see what a church is like, or what sort of church culture that church has as well. I think one example is, if your church pre-MCO has a very high power distance, a dynamic where perhaps your church hierarchy is structured in such a way that the leader makes the call and there's a very huge power distance all the way to the bottom, then I'm willing to make a bet that your church online service will probably look the same way as well. You're probably not going to have an intern emceeing before the service if that wasn't much your culture before this in your physical church service. And so, what we have on screen is now up for a bit more display. And, things like control, things like the way we introduce and articulate, parts of our theology and doctrine, these are just a little bit more visible. And there's something democratizing about the internet as well. It's just up for people to watch. People are less forgiving and they can vote with their feet if they don't agree. And so, there's a degree to which, you're left a little bit more vulnerable, and that can sometimes feel quite destabilizing as well.
Right, great stuff. Paul Lim says with digitization, it can fall into a comfort / safety zone, right? With too many fixated methods. There must be a need for variation of tech, strategic content, and comms seasoned with creative input, right? I think she's talking about content. Yes, content and communication pieces are essential and ought to be timely too. Otherwise, they are just like routine or unseen with no action. It's more of a sharing of a statement, yeah. Another question is from Luke Waiking. He asks, can you elaborate more on digital missions? What do you guys think about that, digital missions?
Yep. So with regards to digital missions, essentially think of it as a mission trip. From a traditional perspective, you may think of a mission trip as praying for a particular community, or even hosting a little session with the children that are there, or it could be sharing a particular skill set. Some go for medical missions or dental missions. In the same way, a digital mission is essentially done digitally, and all of us would have different skill sets that we have that we can actually share digitally. So from a practical perspective, some people may say, hey, I want to do a financial planning webinar online. And then they could share about financial planning, but at the end of it also share a bit about their faith and a bit about the importance of stewardship from a biblical example. That could be a digital mission trip if you see it that way. Through others as well, there's a little movement called IZOP, International Zoom of Prayer. If you actually search on Facebook, they actually have calls called IZOP calls, where people who would just like to have prayer requests would come in and receive prayer over Zoom. And you would actually be surprised that there are people who would go online and actually receive prayer from people that they don't know. Because obviously sometimes they're very challenging moments, and people will just come and search for prayer. And you'll be very familiar with PMs, personal message, or DMs, direct messages.
Do they pray in the upper Zoom as well, Jason?
The upper Zoom. And there are actually multiple different Zoom calls for prayer rooms, right? In fact, during the Global Day of Prayer, where we had a 24/7 prayer time, you could search it. It's been live streamed on YouTube and Facebook. We actually had a secret prayer room where there were people that were praying for the actual 24/7 prayer. And it was hosted by this group called Global Watch, Global Prayer Watch. And there was one moment where there were a lot of nannies and grandmas from Australia and New Zealand just praying for that moment. And they had a rotating time just praying for that 24/7 prayer. Yep. So you can get creative in terms of how you're going to organize your digital mission trip. It could range from 1 hour to a weekend, but definitely not as taxing as, a 7-day trip to a different part of the world.
Yeah. I think just to add to that, there's a real opportunity for evangelism like never before as well. We're seeing, almost an online revival that's happening in the Western church right now, where people are coming back to their first faith in a time that's very tricky. And I think there's something about doing this online that allows for more vulnerability as well, which is amazing when you want to have meaningful conversations about life and faith and big questions about God and pain. One thing that we've observed is Alpha Online seems to work really well now, especially with regard to the small group discussions, because people are just a lot more willing to share what's going on in their heart, in their mind. And the barriers are just so much lower. It's so much more non-threatening. And so this again presents an opportunity for some real conversations. We've seen this in the marriage course as well. Usually in a marriage course, the men are quite quiet, especially in Asia, don't really like to share too much less ask for prayer. But when you put it on the church online platform, we're starting to see a lot more live prayer requests coming from the men as well. Again, coming from the comforts of their home where vulnerability is a little higher.
Yeah. Could you talk a bit more about that? Because Alpha has been doing this a while now. And what you shared is that there's an increase of people signing up and engaging. How do we build community, authentic community in a setting like what Alpha's, because Alpha is a good format, but what are the best practices you've observed?
Yeah, it's a great question, Jason. We've learned a few things about how to do Alpha well, and one thing that is slightly different with an Alpha online model, the ingredients are still the same. So it's all about hospitality, watching a talk, and it's so easy to watch a talk now because it's on the Alpha film series format now. But the third element, which to me makes Alpha, is the small group discussions. And when you flip over to an online model, that makes it a little bit easier, but also a little bit harder. There's a lot more onus on the small group host now to lead the discussions. And so there are some skills that we now need to be informed by in our training to make sure that the small group host can facilitate well. We always say lead stronger a little bit, lead with a bigger version of yourself. So if you're on Zoom, always go 25% more than your usual because the screen absorbs your energy. So be a bigger version of yourself. Speak as if you're speaking to a crowd, not just to one person, because there are more people on Zoom than the face that you see on your immediate screen.
Yeah.
And so there's some things that, you know, we're starting to sort of adjust in our training approach. But I think the main thing is this: people are finding something like Alpha a lot easier to come to. Why? Because they don't have to battle traffic anymore. They don't have to even put on, you know, we all wear face masks, right? We sort of have a facade when we go to physical places. We have to dress up. We have to sort of put on a little persona. With an online Alpha, that all fades away. You can just click a link, join, watch from the comforts of your bedroom, and have a real meaningful conversation there. And people feel a lot safer to do that as well. So there's a real opportunity to do stuff like that. And I know there are amazing tools out there that also build on this, you know, degree of trust and vulnerability. And here we have an opportunity as we go online.
Great. I was just thinking to myself, you're going to be 25% bigger. People often say that on screen you put on weight, you look like you're bigger than normal as well. Anyway, so you're 25% bigger as well.
Yes.
Yeah. But I agree with you, and I think it's so important to be to build community and authenticity in small groups, and it takes time. I don't think it's something that you can do it immediately. Maybe for those who already have a relationship pre-MCO, pre-COVID-19, then going online may be a smoother one. But then what about building communities afresh? I don't know, Jason, I know you've been learning up on this, on building communities online. Do you want to weigh in on this on any points?
On building communities online, I think one way to build a community online is actually to find a very specific niche. A niche is what you call a specific area where people actually find a closeness to. So for example, just recently, I'm in this really high technology area called blockchain in emerging technology, and I actually connected with a friend who works with Facebook's blockchain team, and we'll say, oh, let's build a Christians in blockchain community. So we recently formed a WhatsApp group, and we're actually now gathering people who are actually very passionate about this technology called blockchain, and we'll want to form a bit more community and prayer there. And so if you find in your respective areas of ministry and a certain niche area, this is time where you can build community. It can be on Facebook groups or WhatsApp. And sometimes community doesn't necessarily need to be online as well. I think there was a question by Ken Song about saying there's assumption that everyone has a computer, smartphone, or tablet to get online. But what are thoughts about people who are in the minority, who are not tech savvy or who cannot afford tech? Well, actually, community can also be developed over just a phone call or a text message. Yeah. In fact, I know of some churches that some of their congregation don't actually know how to use Zoom and so on, and they actually send people to homes to help them. I think the young people who know would just set up the Zoom so that they can just press a few clicks of the button to watch church online. And that's where you can actually build community as well through non-technology ways. Other areas as well is how people could actually preload messages that has been created and then put it into a thumb drive or a computer, and then actually give that laptop or computer to locations where internet coverage may also not be good. And then that's also a form of community building. So I think the best way to build community is, because of how everything is amplified, start going down the niche of finding people that are quite specific to some of your unique interests. Yeah. For example, playing the harp. Any Christians who want to play the harp and play Christian music could form a community online right now and connect globally on that.
Yeah, great question. I think Jason, you alluded to Kyung Sen Lim's question. So there's an assumption that everyone has a computer, smartphone, or tablet where they can get online. Do you have any thoughts on reaching the minority who are not tech savvy and cannot afford tech, which is a very true and a very real scenario. The parallel that I get right now is missions in the olden times. I mean, maybe 30, 40, 50 years, maybe 50, 60 years ago, where probably countries where they do not know how to read, or countries who do not have access to certain things, missionaries would go to these places and train and teach and sow into this community so that they can then be able to learn, by the way, the gospel as well, right? So to answer the previous questions of what does it mean to have digital mission, I think part of digital mission also means going to these communities who are a bit more detached or need some technical upgrade, and helping them to do so, right? To teach
Great
them
point.
tools, give them the, how to use the software, set up in the infrastructure as much as possible. I know it's not easy and it's not something that everyone can do, but I think it's something that will really deeply impact, because from, like, for example, back again, teaching people how to read. From learning how to read, they can learn, at the same time they can read Bible, right? So same, I think it's you can draw a parallel there. And missions work looks different today as it did 50, 60 years ago.
Yeah, I think if we go with the philosophy of teaching a man to fish rather than giving a man a fish, it's no different from how the missionaries of old used to teach natives how to read, right? And how to learn the English language so that they could read the Bible, but not only that, so that they could get educated and so that they could go into the marketplace and find a job and support their families with the language that they've just learned. And I think today, Christian organizations that are serving churches and equipping them. I think the word equip now means a slightly different thing when you factor in the new digital world that we're in right now. I love this story of how Alpha India, for example, in the wake of COVID-19, when the Indian church went into a lockdown, they didn't immediately go to train churches on how to change their model to Alpha Online. Their first priority was, are we meeting the practical needs? Are the pastors having enough to eat in the first place? Do they have enough to survive for the next week? And then the second question was, do they have enough tech literacy, and what are the low data solutions for them to move from a physical church service to an online church service? And you've got to adapt your response according to their circumstances. In some churches, they've got enough bandwidth to go to a Zoom platform, so great. But in some churches, where it's 2G network up in the northeast of India, you just have a WhatsApp call or go on Facebook, Facebook Live, which uses a little less data, or just record a sermon and then share it on a WhatsApp video format as well. But it's got to be tailored to where the church is at, differentiated solutions. But serving the church where they are at with the skills that allow them to move forward, not just to be Christians, but even though that has eternal value, but also to be equipped so that they are relevant and effective to survive and replicate themselves.
And there is a spectrum of technology. I mean, high tech, low tech, whatever, is still things that we can do to add value. I also know of a ministry, Faith Comes by Hearing, that they go into the villages and give solar powered Bible books. I mean, not books, but players where you can just play, but you don't need internet connection. All you need is the sun, right? Things like that. I think, or kinetic energy or whatnot. Right. So again, we want to hear from you if you have questions, and we won't take too much longer, but I noticed in the group also, I've seen many familiar faces, and some of you, I feel, have things that you can also share with us, because some of you are more tech savvy. I've seen some things. Again, I won't call you out, but if you want to share, just put your hands up and I'll turn on the video. And I was chatting with Pastor Swimming, Ng Swimming, who is in the group as well. So I think he has some questions. I'm going to ask him to unmute and turn on his camera as well. Pastor. Hi, Pastor Swimming.
Okay. Yeah, no need video lah.
No need video. Okay.
Good hearing to you all. Good ideas, good suggestion. Okay. Purely for a pastoral heart. Okay. We still feel that we are missing out some of our members who do not join our service, and there's no way to know. And I mean, everybody is very cakey. They all say good things and all that. But somewhere along the way, it's very hard to pastor people in this situation. Online has its strength, but at the same time, there's nothing beating face to face, and that's not always possible to do it at this current time. So I don't know whether our pastor panelists have some great suggestion for us how to be pastor people who are not actively involved in the small group, your connect group, we have discipleship groups. They are not linked up, but if the physical service, they become faithfully. By this time, they are neither here nor there, because we don't know. On Facebook, they never log in. They never check anything, so we got no idea the 200 devices who is there at the other end.
Can't measure.
Okay, yeah, what do we do? Those who fall through the cracks with this.
Okay, great question, Pastor. All right,
Yeah.
thanks, Pastor, for your question.
Yeah, I think I'll just give a short answer. I think Abel can answer as well. For me, the quick answer is just friendship. You know, do you have those friends like after you meet them, right? Then suddenly you just feel like you want to read the Bible more or you want to pray more, and just by the connection of talking regularly with friends who are like-minded, then you sort of feel, oh, maybe I should actually get back to church again. So that's what I do with some of my life group as well, you know, and ask them, hey, how are you doing? And then then you suddenly see them on life group just by the friendship that you have. But I mean, maybe Abel, any tactics or strategies?
Yeah. Thanks, Pastor. I think this is a question that a lot of us are asking as well, because inevitably some people are just not on the church online platforms. They're just not on Zoom. And even if they're on Zoom, there are varying degrees of engagement, right? Some people are just perpetually muted, you know, not engaging. So you don't really know whether they are even tuning in attentively or engaging in a meaningful way. And I think the encouragement here for us is it's okay. You know, I don't think we can ever replicate perfectly to 100% what the physical church gathering experience is with an online service. And I think it would be a mistake for us on this platform to make that presumption or to make that statement that you can take whatever good that came from the physical church, everything that was there, and move it, you know, and replace that and substitute that with a church online. I think there are a lot of theological ramifications with that as well. How do you do communion? So again, depending on your church background and theology, you know, that you might or might not agree with that. But what I do know is that you can never replace physical presence. There's just something about how we've been built. You know, we've been designed in such a way that we are embodied creatures. Someone said to me recently something that, you know, has stayed with me for a while, which is that Jesus could have saved us from the heights of heaven, but he still chose to come embodied as a human on earth to save us and to walk and live among us. And there's something in the human body, there's something about us being embodied creatures that matters. And so I think it's just an encouragement to us to recognize that we will never be able to replicate what good we have with a physical church, with an online church. I think there are new opportunities with an online church, but you're just not going to always have, you know, 100% of the people in a physical church setting, you know, moving over to an online church setting. There are many reasons for that. There's the digital divide, there's a cultural divide, there's an economic divide, there's a mindset divide. Some people just don't, you know, relate well on a digital device. And understandably, you know, I was just thinking my parents' generation has lived through various technological revolutions. They were the generation of the radio, and then they saw the black and white TV. And the poor things from that generation, right, they're suddenly now in the Zoom generation, and they've just lived through a lifetime of technological revolutions again and again. And the truth is just not every generation will engage with this platform to the same degree as others. Some will be more native than others. And I think Jason's answer is right, friendship, but also the encouragement is eventually the world will open up again. This too will pass. And I think for us in Malaysia, this is, you know, in a matter of a few weeks now, we're going to partially open. I think some churches can meet up to 30 people, and the number will probably increase, God willing. But with time, you know, we will be able to gather again. And I think my suspicion is that we will all engage in some form of hybrid model of physical plus online. And that's going to be a very interesting phase of the Malaysian church history. My personal hope is that we will always have an online offering, because there are opportunities that come with an online church, but you can never replace a physical church. And for the sake of the people who are a little bit older, the people who you know, don't have the devices, who are not, you know, digitally literate or savvy, we hope that they can come back to physical church at some point soon. And I think the interim solution is, could we do home cells? Could we gather in small groups? Could we offer a hand of friendship? Could we take up the phone call and call them? But there's always those sort of bridge solutions in the interim at the same time.
Yeah, great thoughts. I can hear from Pastor Swimming's heart, the shepherd's heart. wanting to make sure no one is left out and no one is straying off. And I don't think there's any, like you guys said, there's no real easy answer. But if there are people in this webinar who have answers or solutions, please weigh in and please share as well. But my first thought is, it's very hard to see every single member in church. But what we do need to do, and you alluded to it earlier, Abel, as well, is in the small groups, right? I think as a pastor, the thing that the pastor would need to sow into more is leaders who will then look into the members. So it's not just like one pastor looks out after the entire church, or how many thousand or how many hundreds, but it has to be on like, you know, how we know Jesus focused on the 12. So I think as a pastor, maybe it's come to a point. I've heard many pastors say this as well. People who've done ministry for many years. The question was asked, if you were to do it all over again, what would you change? And the pastors would say, I would focus on small groups. I will focus on maybe a core discipleship group, right? And maybe again, the pastor's heart is there, and he wants to care for all, the 99 sheep, and also the one who's straying. But I think that the season now is small groups, where even churches will need to be meeting up in smaller groups, right? We've been talking about that. And I think then for a pastor is to have connection with his next level. And if he's wondering about that member over there, this pastor would know about it, because or this leader or this cell leader or this ministry leader would have had that connection. And not to say keep tabs on them, because if you're talking about tech tools, right, I think there are ways to measure, I don't know, analytics and data and all that. But I think the next challenge for pastors is to look at their next level strong,
yes,
and level up in their tech. I mean, in their tech engagement somewhat, right? Then they are the ones that will connect with the members and all right. Okay. There's another question. Okay, there's a small statement here. Pastor Ng Ki Chuan says that the real challenge for pastors who preach is not being able to feel their audience, right? The connection factor is difficult for online church. Are there some ways we can get to at least feel of our folks in church? You get what I mean? And the other one is, from my experience of online training of others, it is really hard to build relationship with those who you are training. Some will not want to switch on their video, and you only see a blank spot or their still picture. Do you have suggestions on how to build relationship with people you train, especially those who are strangers to you? Any thoughts?
Wow, those are great questions.
Yeah. Abel, what has your experience been from the Zoom calls as a leader?
I think that question is so true, right? That again, and that's why I said you can never replicate the experience that you get in a physical setting with an online setting. I think on some level, the online setting is, a brave new world with new opportunities. So there's something, amazing about that. But in other respects, the online world is just a poor comparison, a poor imitation of what you could get with a physical setting. And so one of them is public speaking. Speaking on Zoom, speaking in front of a screen, in front of a camera, all the skills that you used to build, and some of the pastors on this call tuning in, you might have spent decades building those skills to engage a physical live congregation, to entice them with the message, to use humor. Suddenly, all of that are no longer as powerful when you're speaking to a very quiet camera, or maybe one or two cameramen behind the camera, for those of you who are recording on a church site. And I think there's no easy answer to that. I think that the first thought that I can offer is it's just something that we have to learn. And this goes back to the point of emptying ourselves and being open to absorbing new pools of knowledge, and relearning again what it means to do public speaking in front of a very unresponsive computer screen or a camera that's very silent. And I know a lot of churches are engaging with that right now. You're just learning, and you're taking this time to be a massive R&D organization. I think this is the season to think like a startup. And if you're not thinking like a startup, then you're going to be struggling over the long haul. What does it mean to think like a startup? Well, startups are flat organizations. They can't have very big power distances. They have to be very open and flexible. They need to be friends with mistakes. If they are too embarrassed by mistakes, then it's going to be very difficult and unsafe to learn. They're going to have to be, startups are great with small groups. They decentralize a lot. They have small teams because they know that if a team is too big, then decision making is a little bit difficult. And so we all have to be startups now. And what the last 3 months has done to us as a Malaysian church is just flattened the playing field, and we're all suddenly now startups. We're all starting at level 0, and we're relearning and learning new skills all from scratch again. Public speaking is one of them, but there's so many others. How do you do a small group over a Zoom? How do you engage new teams of volunteers? We don't know what we don't know now, and so we're constantly asking. And I think one good question to ask at every church leadership team meeting or every small ministry team meeting is, what are we learning? Are we creating space to constantly go again through that cycle of build, measure, and learn, constantly learning from our mistakes?
Yeah, and the idea is to not be afraid to make mistakes, but fail forward, right? Keep doing it, because the worst thing you can do is nothing at all, right? Just sit passively, and people in the meantime are the world is still hurting. People are going through hard times. People are still going through spiritual lag and all these kind of things. And if we were to just wait for things to go back to normal, there's going to be a lot of damage that's going to be done in that period of time. But that question though, do you think things will go back to 100% normal? I mean, both of you, what are your thoughts?
No, I don't think they will go back to 100% normal. And I heard a quote somewhere as well that to put the digital online church back on the shelf after the lockdown is to really ignore one of the greatest opportunities that a church has to stay relevant and in the forefront. But that being said as well, I think the most effective ministry, if some leaders and pastors are thinking, I want to get my congregation to volunteer, what do? I think use one of the most effective and oldest ways of ministry, which is the follow-up ministry. Just ask them, how are you doing? Can I pray for you? How do you find the message? And some, sorry, I missed the message from last week. Then that's when you can come and just be a listening ear and pray for them. So the best way to leverage technology is really, and to have volunteers is just to help enabling them to just follow up with the church members. And
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe last 2 questions. Sarah Fong asks, can you give some ideas to leverage tech in ministry in the context of our Malaysian legal and social framework? Question from Joshua to Sarah Fong. Any thoughts on that? To leverage tech in ministry in the context of maybe social justice and legal framework. Is there anything that comes to mind?
It's an interesting question.
Yeah.
You have a legal background. Do you have any thoughts to offer on this?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it would be good to have a bit more context. But I think when you say legal and social framework, I think some may also say from a privacy perspective, or also in terms of respecting other religions. I know sometimes when you post flyers on events, you need to make some disclaimers as well, like for non-Muslims only. So I think in the context of this as well, it's important to also be clear that whenever there's a public invitation, what the context of the invitation is. The best and safest way, obviously, is through closed groups. So groups where you actually know all members within that group, and through just one-on-one personal connection. So I think that's really being respectful and culturally intelligent as well. So in the context of the social and legal framework, I think that would be the best way to act. And I think when it comes to engagement in technology, I always see in levels. So level 1 technology would really be, just WhatsApp and Facebook. Then level 2, you can get a bit more creative and go on YouTube and Facebook with live streaming and different capabilities and Zoom. Then when you get level 3 and 4, there will be entrepreneurs out there who would be innovating. I know the faith tech community are developing solutions, and there are a lot of entrepreneurs who are adopting a lot of ideas. A lot of churches are becoming entrepreneurial and launching solutions that are helping others as well. So then you can start thinking about level 3 and level 4 technologies in the days and months to come on how you can engage others. But I think start with level 1 first, through WhatsApp, through small groups and people that you know.
Okay, and probably end with this last message. which is more of a comment. Like Pauline Lim says that, I'm not sure how churches here in Malaysia are with database management and extending care to members visibly during the MCO. Some of her contacts in the US shared that the moment they went into lockdown, their churches arranged for care packs, especially to their ministry / small groups leads to encourage them into a season of virtual connecting and shepherding. The regular care and check-ins are something probably we Asians can learn and emulate. And I think, yes, there are many things that we can learn from different ministries, so many that were shared from Jason earlier on. And I think one thought that we had, remember before even starting the show, was, can we get a better feel of what's happening on the ground? Because when it comes to database and comes to all this survey, again, go back to my point of activation, I think we need to activate people who are more savvy in this subject, because Rema Radio, we would like to provide this service, and as a inter-church kingdom-minded ministry, we want to hear from the different churches, and we want to resource, we want to know what's happening on the ground. So we will be launching hopefully soon some form of a survey like the Barna Group survey, to find out what is happening, what's the pulse of Malaysian churches now, right? What are the needs, what are the challenges, what are the best practices, and also to then respond to it, and probably invite both of you again to unpack those things, because I think today's 1.5 hours is just barely scratching the surface. There's so many more that we have talked about. So we've talked some things, but there's so many more things that we have not talked about, and we are still in learning mode, aren't we? We haven't got it figured out yet. Yeah, it's still a learning.
Just to add, if some of the Barna study results were fascinating, and you'd like to learn more about what we are seeing with the global church, not just the Malaysian church, but the global church, what's going on with the global church and its interactions with church online interfaces, the digital world. There's going to be a digital strategy webinar that we're organizing on the 15th of July evening. And so, I'm sure we can share the link through Rema Radio as well. We're going to have David Kinnaman from Barna present along with Nikki Gamble as well.
Awesome, awesome. So I think we will conclude now. Final thoughts from both of you. Jason.
Yeah, I think I want to end specifically on the database as well. I just can't emphasize how important it is for all of you to have very good records of your church members' contact details. I know restaurants right now that are suffering because they don't have contact details of their customers who are eating. And then they realize now that they're online, they don't know how to contact them. And then all they require on is their phone number that people call for takeaway orders. And then I know a favorite restaurant of mine, their landline got disconnected and they just lost sales for a good 1 week before it got connected back again. And obviously it's now slowly coming back up. So if you are leading a church or group, make sure that you have the data of your church members and make sure that you actually use them and use, even if it's a pen and paper details, have them. Data is so important. And I think that is the future of technology as well, the intelligent use of data.
Right. Abel, final thoughts, closing thoughts.
My closing thought would be, if you are in a church that went online, then congratulations, you just planted a new church over the last 3 months. And if you are feeling exhausted, you're feeling like you've had the battle of your life, because it's been such an intense season, it's just because you've just, changed in the way that you worked, and suddenly you went into a startup mode. So, I think, balance that care with challenge. And this is a time to keep accelerating and being visionary, but it's also a time to take care of our people and to encourage them that these are really unprecedented times. And yes, there are opportunities that come with doing ministry with technology, but there's also massive threats, and it's extremely exhausting. Someone just posted on the comment section, Zoom fatigue. A lot of us are going through that as well. Mental health cases are on the rise. People are, as much as we are more digitally connected, we are also more socially disconnected. Yeah. We've never been more socially disconnected than now as well. And so there is, a care to this conversation that needs to be considered too. And I want to say that your church is only as strong as your second line of leaders. A lot of us here might be, leading ministries. But remember, it's never about us, right? Leadership is never a given. It's only a privilege and a momentary responsibility. And all we need to do is look to our second line of leaders and see how are they doing? Are they growing in this time? And are they empowered in a season of huge pivoting and huge adjustment? Could this be the making of the next leader of your church? And so at a time of destabilization, the encouragement is let's turn this into opportunity and see the gospel-shaped opportunities that are around us as we go into this new world.
Great thoughts. I just want to read this one statement because I missed it out in one of the Facebook. There's several streams and several watch parties going on. I'm just jumping from one place, multitasking as well. But Pastor Joanne Lee says that she has this idea of an everyday church, on site and online. Right? She's still seeking for wisdom and what goes where. She's asking what would work best online. So if that's something that you can resonate with, or you feel like, wow, there's something that I've been thinking about as well, try to connect with Pastor Joanne Lee, right? Just search for her. I think she's based in Malacca, and maybe you can work something out together. My thoughts are, I think we are going through this, and we are going through this together, and we all have different skill sets and pieces of the puzzle that God has given to us, right? But I think what God's plan is we need to work together, because He gives grace to certain ministries and certain people in some areas, and certain things that you need grace. You won't have it all. That's just not God's design. You won't have all the answers. You will have strength and grace in one area, but then you will depend on another church, another ministry, another denomination or whatnot to actually depend on their grace. And that's where Jesus said, you'll be known to be disciples by your love. And in this way of sharing and helping each other out is where the love is evident, right? And I also want to say that it's okay, because I've heard some conversation on being resilient and responding to the pandemic. One key thing that people share, and it's very hard for church leaders to do, is to be vulnerable and to say that we don't know and we're still figuring things out. Because the expectation, I mean, we have the members to blame as well, because people expect leaders to have it all figured out, and we are looking to you for direction, download from God and just tell us what to do, you know what I mean? But I feel it's okay to be transparent and just to share, hey, as a church, this is what we're doing, this is what we're trying to do, this is our struggle, this is what we need. And this word keeps coming back. It's a season of activation, because from the needs that are shared is where people will say, hey, I think, I don't know, maybe I can meet that need. Maybe there's something that I can contribute. There's something I can be a part of. There's something that God has prepared me all these years and I didn't know why. Hey, now I know why. So it's a season of discovery. It's a season of really just seeking Him all over again and being hungry and asking God, we're desperate. What do we do now? I think if you're in a place where you're dependent on God, that's a healthy place to be, right? God will not lead you to a place where you are not dependent on Him. And I think all of us are so dependent on Him right now. Let's acknowledge that. Let's acknowledge that we don't have it all figured out. I know today is the day we're supposed to share more and give some handles and I hope we have to an extent, but no one can give direction and the next few steps as much as God can, right? So I think today is a great start to the conversation, and I do hope we can engage more and have more conversations like this moving forward. What do you guys think?
Sounds good.
Yeah? All right. So thank you everyone in the Zoom room and everyone in Facebook. There's a lot more in Facebook for being part of today's webinar. Forgive me if I was a bit all over the place and unprepared. But I think I really enjoyed this time, and I think I've learned so much from everyone. And just maybe before we end, I would like to, you're talking about not connected and not seeing each other. Can we end? I sometimes do this with my webinars. Can we end with a group photo? Then I would like to invite you to turn on your cameras, every one of you in this group, and we'll take a group picture together, okay? Some exited is fine. Like church also lah. Some church end people start running away. But some who are here, please, I would love to see all of you. And then we take a group picture together. Yep. Okay, I'm going to unmute everyone so that I have the feel of
yeah, some will be having dinner, swimming, cooking.
Yeah.
Yes, some are washing their mouths right now, trying to swallow their dinner.
Okay, I don't know what's up with my Zoom. I can't unmute everyone now. It's a different setting. But anyway, can I invite everyone to just turn on your cameras, and then we'll take a quick picture, group photo, and then we will conclude. Am I host? Am I host? I am, right?
Yes, you are.
Okay, hold on. I think I didn't.
Yeah.
I think the people who are watching on Facebook Live now are very happy that they're watching on Facebook Live.
All right, smile everyone. Cheers. Okay, good. Thanks everyone. I hope you find this time insightful and we've learned something today. And good seeing all of you. All right, take care.
Thanks
And God
everyone.
bless.
Good night.
Good night. Bye-bye.